for joining us on The Skeptic Psychic, where we delve into ancient societies, the ghosts, the paranormal, UFOs, all looking at it from the perspective of the true believer and from the skeptic perspective. Joining me, my partner, my co-host, my sibling, Kimber Rodriguez. Myself, I am Richard Gregg. And again, let's look into being the skeptic psychic.
Hello. How you do? It's such a wonderful feeling to be with you. And even though we are so far away, I know I'm with you always. But now
Okay.
we've got to start the show once again.
Okay. That's an interesting intro.
Yes, it is.
How are you this evening?
I'm doing fine. That was just another Skeptic Psychic original.
I figured. So what's been new with you this week?
Well, I had this interesting dream the other night. I dreamed that I was at a fairgrounds. It was type of I would say a fair or uh, it was an occasion. But the interesting thing was, it was all SCTV related. SCTV being Second City Television. I mean, Andrea Martin was there. John Candy was there. Rest in peace. And they were all kind of hobnobbing and doing little sketches uh, in front of crowds. You'd sit there following them. They'd stop, do a little sketch, and then they wander off. And it was always kind of on the improv type situation. And as I'm walking around, I'm of course, I would say schmoozing with the people, and I start singing Waylon Jennings' "Good Hearted Woman," and of all people, Gary Collins shows up and starts chewing me out up and down that I should not be singing that song, that sort of thing, and I'm like, and next thing I know, Joe Flaherty's like, "Who the heck does he think he is? Come on, you can sing whatever you want to. We're more than happy to for you to sing." And it's all of a sudden everybody is jumping on Gary Collins because I was singing a Waylon Jennings song.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
I guess.
Yeah, so I was telling some friends of ours the other day about how um, mom and dad were at the rodeo with Jim Scott. And hi, Shelly, glad you're here. We've missed you. Glad you're feeling better. Um,
Yeah.
Sorry, I was telling some friends about when mom and dad were at the rodeo with Jim Scott when he was just a little kid, and he ran off, and mom and dad were freaking out and had the police and security looking for him, and they found him backstage on Johnny Cash's lap. Or
That
was it
was
Merle
it.
Haggard?
No, basically, it might have been Merle Haggard, but Johnny Cash was we were in Floresville.
Oh, okay. So it was Merle Haggard then, but they got a kick out of that story. They
Yeah.
thought that was a cute story, and what a way to meet a celebrity. And so, else is any other news in paranormal world today before we get into our today's topic?
Hmm. I don't know. Have you heard any other paranormal news in this topic?
Not that I can think of offhand. Um, been looking through and I haven't found anything new that I haven't seen before. So, um, I guess we can. I do want to start off by welcoming those that are here with us tonight. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe and click the notification. If you're on Twitch, again, please like and subscribe. If you're listening to a replay on a podcast, we ask that you rate us and review us. And how many ratings do we like?
I Fine, fine. Kind line? I don't know. 5 stars.
Yes, we do like 5 stars. We'll take whatever you give us, but we do prefer five. And please review us. We do read reviews on air, so it's a good way to get a shout out. If you have anything you want to talk about on the show, make sure you email us, and that's at info@skepticpsychic. You can email us questions. You can email us um, just about anything you want. Questions, comments, stories we'll read on air, ideas for the show. And so, what is today's topic about? I'm sure our listeners are tired of us rambling and want to know what we're talking about today.
See my background, ladies and gentlemen? That's what our topic is today. The Ouija
Yeah,
or
spirit boards, Ouija
spirit board.
boards.
Yes.
So, let's go ahead and kick into it.
As my alter ego, Steel Fanboy says, let's get the show on the road.
Yes.
So we're gonna have to start off with Ouija. It'll pronounce either Ouija or Ouija. The name originates from Charles Kinnard, who owned the manufacturing company that who originally made the board. Kinnard claimed to have been given the name by the board itself, and was apparently under the impression that it was an ancient Egypt word meaning good luck. This is almost definitely sheer, pure nonsense. Many people believe it comes from the combination of two words for yes, the French oui and the German ja. By that logic, it should be roughly pronounced as oui ja. However, in English, it would be the yes, yes board.
That's interesting because I always heard that the ja part was, I think I heard it was Japanese. So, it's really interesting that it's actually German.
Yes, it is actually oui ja.
Interesting. So it's neither Ouija or Ouija. It's actually should be pronounced Ouija.
Oui ja. Now, of course, you fold out the board, and the first thing you're always going to see is the planchette. Planchette is a French word for little plank.
So if a little person is planking, that would be a planchette.
Yes, because it's usually, but the planchette is usually a heart-shaped flat piece of wood equipped with two wheeled casters and a pencil holder, the aperture pointing downwards. It is used to facilitate, which would possibly be another topic, automatic writing.
Yes, I would love to do a topic on automatic writing someday. Now, Charles Kennard always did have his eye out for a chance to make a quick buck. However, he was not the greatest nor the luckiest businessman, which is ironic, supposing the board supposedly told him good luck, but he was not very lucky, actually. Also, it appears he was not very honest. Second child of a successful Delaware merchant, he moved to Maryland's Eastern Shore in the late 1880s after he developed a secret bone mix recipe for fertilizer. In fairness, yeah, I wonder what that bone mix was.
Well,
Of course, everybody in the fertilizer business claimed to have a secret recipe. So you gotta, take that one with a grain of salt.
and pepper.
Yes. And maybe a little cayenne.
Always gotta have that cayenne pepper.
Yes. Now, following his initial success, his Chesterton plant went to auction due to a combination of drought, competition, and debt. However, all was not lost. A Prussian immigrant named E.C. Reicht kept an office next to Kennard's on the first floor of his four-story wood frame hotel in the Chesterton's small, tiny business district. Now, Reicht was a furniture maker turned coffin maker turned undertaker. So this was not, really a typical career for the day, as a lot of people were getting sick, so there was a lot of death.
Yeah, see, oh, if people died, you can make the coffin. But hey, a lot of people like to sit. Come on, you got tables, you got chairs, you got
Yes.
sedans, you got
Yes.
divans.
Wright also was a little bit of a tinkerer. Hi, Jackie from Learn About Ghosts. Glad you're here. Glad you can make us. Or make it, join us, not make us, but join
If
us.
you make it through this,
I'm glad you could make it and join us, not make us. Sorry, words.
I swear,
Hard.
it's them. I promise you. I promise you. I'm making them.
Yes. So, since Reich was a little bit of a tinker as well, Kennard had another plan. Now, this is just a little bit of backstory. 2 generations earlier, a pair of girls in upstate New York, who we all know, legendary as the Fox sisters. If you're into spiritualism, those names should ring a bell.
Yes.
They did claim to be mediums and said that they were able to interpret mysterious knocks from the other side. Knock 3 times if you
On the
want
door
me,
of me, the
twice
walls
on the
have ears.
pipe. Yes.
Sorry, different songs.
Sorry. They had launched a spiritual movement that continued to hold sway across the country. In fact, in the aftermath of the Civil War, with so many husbands, fathers, and sons lost in the conflicts, battles, spiritualism, which was the belief that we can speak to the dead, had only gained steam with people who were desperate for a connection to the departed loved ones and the greater meaning of their own lives.
Yes.
So yes. So if knock 3 times if you can hear me, twice on the pop. Oh wait, twice on the pipe if you ain't gonna show.
Hmm. Now, in this constant context, 1866,
30,
during the
eighteen eighty six.
86,
Yes.
during this period of Kennard and Reich shared a hallway, newspaper reports began appearing about a talking board phenomenon sweeping Ohio, including an Associated Press story that ran in the local Kent County News. Also, that time, according to a later Baltimore American story, that Kennard and Reich most likely were inspired by newspaper accounts, but began collaborating and making at least a dozen of their own talking boards. Reich, the biggest coffee maker in town, is making these on the side, explains Robert Mulch, the world's foremost talking board historian. And it's these prototypes that became the Ouija board. But it's Kennard, when he leaves Chestertown for Baltimore in 1890, when he continues in the fertilizer game and starts a real estate business, who begins pitching on what he says is his own talking board invention to prevent potential investors.
So if he was in the fertilizer business, does that mean that he was full of a lot of bullshit?
He was he might have been doing a little bit of tossing the old bull hockey around. That blessed bullcorn with the little bone marrow scrubbed into there.
It seems like he was quite full of a lot of that stuff. Maybe that's why
Yes,
he was catering and calling it fertilizer.
might be. And after numerous rejections, Elijah Bond, a local attorney who claims that his sister-in-law was a strong medium, finally took an interest. Soon enough, the Kennard Novelty Company, which incorporated the day before Halloween 125 years ago, began to manufacture the Ouija. After numerous rejections, Elijah Bond, a
Okay,
All right,
that's yeah.
yes,
Sorry about that. See, should be where it says Bond was right about his
his
sister-in-law
sister-in-law
too.
too, Helen Peters, proved convincingly enough with Kennard's new talking board to win over a skeptical U.S. Patent Office. She not only gets the credit for earning the stamp of a legitimate of approval from the federal government, certifying that the board delivered as it had been promised.
Okay. So, yes, an undertaker and an opportunist named Kennard invented the only patented board game, billed as both a mystical oracle for communicating with the spirits and wholesome amusement, ever to outsell Monopoly in a given year. So, Parker Brothers isn't responsible for creating the Ouija board as people seem to think.
No, it was Kenneth Kennard Novelty Company.
Yes. That's interesting.
Uh, bankrolled by Elijah Bond, whose
Yes.
sister-in-law claimed to be a strong medium.
And claimed it worked.
Yes, which actually gave the skeptical U.S. Patent Office the okay.
Yes. Now it comes straight from the 19th century seances, says Nick Ricketts, curator at the National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York. That sounds like a place I'd like to go.
Yeah.
Wonder if they have like a lot of different games and stuff. That's
Oh,
that's what
yeah,
I'm
they
getting
do.
from that. Interesting. So he was noted say about a glow in the dark board and a classic version that are still sold today. Not stole, but sold. Tongue, words, hard.
Mhm.
They are
Exactly.
still sold today, not stole. Um, and there has never been another brand board game like it. And I don't see it fading away anytime soon, Nick Ricketts said. Shelley says it's a wonderful museum. I would love to go someday.
Yes.
The story of the Ouija board, however, is more than a tale of snake oil salesmen duping the Victorian masses, or subsequently a game of harmless fun at a million junior high sleepovers. While it remains an amazingly
Let's
endearing
not forget about the giggling girls.
well, those are at the sleepover.
Yes.
Yes. We've all been there
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, you're moving it. No, you're moving it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, while it remains an amazingly enduring pop culture phenomenon tied to the rise of horror movies, paranormal industrial complex, its saga is also about the universal desire to find answers to life's biggest questions, the history of psychology, and even the development of neuroscience.
Yes. It has always been a board game, a parlor game, but it has been more than just a board game for some people too, Ricketts says. In the 19th century, people had a much different relationship to death than we do today. It was more closer to the everyday experience. Now that we do everything we can in hopes of avoiding aging, let alone engage into real thoughts of death. But in the 1800s, people only lived to be 50 years old. Mothers would have children, and six of them would die. Their parlor room was also their funeral rooms. And
Mhm.
yes, they would actually stay up with the dead for at least 24 hours before the funeral would be, because the parlor room was just that, where you set your loved one in that room so people can come in and out on those days of death. But, not surprising perhaps, there is a dark side of the two buried in Ouija origin story. There has always been is where the money is at stake. And by the early 1890s, some 2,000 boards were already being sold a week. William Fuld, who worked for and invested in the Kennard Novelty Company, eventually gained control of the Ouija business, and after the founder had cashed out early, went on to make millions in manufacturing the boards in Baltimore and elsewhere, but only after his brother was cut out of the company. Their ensuing lawsuits was mere no spat. William's brother Isaac became so embittered that he only had his baby's daughter exhumed and relocated from the Fudd family grain uh, site during the cemetery's renovations. The two sides of the local families would not speak for 96 years.
Mm.
And tragically, William Fuld, who'd suffered a fatal accident at his Hansford Avenue factory, once he claimed that the 1919 Baltimore Sun story that the Ouija had told him to build. Prepare for big business. Overseeing the installation of the flag, an iron railing gave way and he fell off the roof of the structure, which still stands and has been converted into a senior apartment complex. On his deathbed, the coroner reports that a broken rib pierced his heart. He made his children promise never to sell the Ouija board out of the family since Ricketts.
So, of course, Fold's family did sell, but not for 4 decades. And who did they sell it to? Of course, Parker Brothers. And they promptly moved Ouija to its base of operations in Salem, Massachusetts. In 1967, the first year it was headquartered in the town infamous for witch trials, Ouija sold 2 million boards. By comparison, Monopoly, an early version, was invented in 1903 and wasn't as popular until the Great Depression when it fulfilled a kind of fantasy escapism. The Ouija, on the other hand, was a sensation from the outset, long before even its first film appearances, which date back to Hollywood's beginnings. Which is interesting because I always thought that Monopoly came first and then they got the Ouija afterwards.
No,
But it
no,
was actually the other way around.
exactly.
So that's, again, very interesting because I was always like, why would Parker Brothers make something evil that would sell for this long? I mean, there's no way a Ouija board could be real. That's before I had my first experience.
Right.
Now, going back, Ouija's public image has always been complicated. Initially, the mysterious oracle was marketed as a game to enliven a party or encourage little light-hearted intimacy for romance. Or could be romantic couples who are
Yeah.
often these
Stop
are
playing with my leg. Woo!
it's not me. Yes. These were often depicted in early advertisements with the board resting on their knees as they sit across from each other, both hands on the planchette, looking into each other's eyes fondly. In fact, Norman Rockwell, who was fond of depicting the revealing moments of everyday life, painted a well-dressed suitor and a young woman chairs pulled face to face while playing the Ouija for the cover of the Saturday Evening Post back in 1920. Also, less well known is the Ouija board's use as an inspiration or automatic writing tool by acclaimed novelists and poets such as Sylvia Plath, who wrote dialogue over a Ouija board, and Pulitzer Prize winner James Merrill. Merrill used notes from the Ouija consultations in his 560-page epic poem, The Changeling Light at Sandover, which contained messages from W.B. Yeats, friend Maya Deren, and the Archangel Michael himself.
Hmm. You have to read that.
Yes,
But
that's
over
interesting.
time, the relatively innocence of the Ouija board, or at least its nonpartisan relationship between good and evil, gave way to a more sinister reputation as Hollywood began using it for dark purposes. After The Exorcist, in which Linda Blair's character, Reagan, explains to her mom, played by Ellen Burstyn, how she used the family's Ouija board to ask questions of Captain Howdy, the demon who eventually takes possession of her, and the board's occult status was cemented. Since then, it's shown up in more than 20 films and has made countless appearances in ever growing number of paranormal themed shows and, a, and around a Ouija associated phenomenon of populate the internet. Of course, Most recently, the 2014 movie Ouija did so well in the box office that they decided a sequel. When it was released, the movie so dramatically boosted board sales that petitioners by
Evangelican.
evangelical Christian groups began to ban the Ouija, stating, popping up again, Catholic.com, a lay-run Catholics and evangelistic website, describes the Ouija as far from harmless. Still, the most interesting thing about the Ouija board might be the latest research around it from the University of British Columbia that shows it actually does work, just not the way we might assume.
Yes, a few years ago, Sidney Fells, a professor of electrical and computer engineering at UBC, brought out a Ouija board at a Halloween party attended by graduate students, including many who were foreign born and unfamiliar with how it works. They assumed it required batteries. No, you don't need batteries. It will move, I told them, Fells recalls. I gave them some mystical explanation tied into Halloween, and we all had a good laugh. But lo and behold, when Fells returned, the grad students were enthralled because the planchette was moving on its own. Or so it appeared. The mechanism at work was actually something known as ideomotor effect. This refers to the influence of the unconscious mind on muscle movements. And this was first identified back in 1852, preceding Sigmund Freud's theory of the unconscious mind by decades. Dr. William Benjamin Carpenter discovered the ideomotor effect while investigating the unconscious mind's ability to direct motor activity. Shortly after, other researchers began linking that discovery to, you guessed it, spiritual phenomenon.
Do 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 do
Phenomenon. Do,
do
do,
do
do,
do
do.
do. Phenomenon. Do 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 do. Sorry,
Now, days,
funny joke.
yes. Now, days later, still fascinated by the student's experience, Fels shared the story with colleague Ron Rensink, a psychology and computer science professor, and that got the ball rolling about whether the board could serve as a tool to look at unconscious knowledge.
Now we didn't know if we would find anything, but when we did, the results really surprised us. Phil said. When the study participants were asked to answer or guess at a set of challenging questions, they were correct about 50% of the time. But when responding using the board, in which participants believed they had the ability to receive correct answers from another person teleconferencing via a robot Ouija partner, they scored correctly up to 65% of the time. In actuality, the robot was a ruse. It was not responding to the video conferencing player, but subtly amplifying the study participants' tiny unconscious movements. It was significant of how much better they did on these questions, Resnick says. If you don't think so, consider the difference between roulette when the odds are 50-50 versus 65 to 35. The implication is that once the unconscious is much smarter than anyone knew, capable of pulling up bits of stored information not accessible to the conscious mind. Results and a study replicated the findings, which they reported to the academic journal Consciousness and Cognization. The discovery of Ouija's ability to tap into the unconscious knowledge is not the only development in taking the board's 125-year-old story. However, the reconciliation of William Fudd's family with his brother Isaac's clan after nearly a century of silence is the other compelling occurrence.
Now, the two sides had long lost contact until Murch began posting his research on the web nearly 2 decades ago. I guess that would be like around 19 or 2003. Can you believe it? It's already been That would be 2 decades.
Mm-hmm.
That is crazy.
Yes, it was. It is.
That's when Stuart Fold, the 60 something grandson of Isaac Fold, and Kathy Fold, the granddaughter of William Fold, separately reached out to Murch in the hopes of learning more about their ancestors. I was talking to each one individually at first without even knowing it. I'm sorry, without the other one knowing it, Murch recalls. I was aware of the feud in the family and didn't want to upset either one. But then Kathy called one night and asked for Stuart's phone number. It turns out we were living 5 miles apart while growing up and didn't know it, Kathleen Fold, Stuart's wife, said, as Stuart had passed away last year. Two sides of the family, which now include great grandchildren and great great grandchildren of the brothers, have been getting together regularly ever since. While some of the descendants did hold on to the Ouija and other talking board memorabilia, Isaac later attempted to launch a talking board competitor named Oracle. I remember when that came out. However, no one apparently ever took it serious, had spiritual interest in the Ouija, not even when they were kids. Not me, says Kathleen Fold, chuckling. I was a good Irish Catholic girl. I had 8 cousins who were nuts. I think I remember hearing about the Oracle.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds very familiar.
Yeah, she adds, however, that Stewart did take a great deal of interest in learning about his grandfather and ancestors, as well as the history of the former family business, if not the surrounding mythicism. I know it's mythicism, but I prefer mythicism, especially as he got older. I'll tell you a funny story, she says. We went up to the Poconos for a golfing trip one year, and there was a conference of priests taking place at the hotel where we stayed. I don't remember why or how it came up, but Stewart ends up telling a group of priests were they were talking that his family once made the Ouija board. All of the priests immediately start making crosses with their fingers.
Back,
Fold
back.
continues. They started asking Stewart all kinds of questions. They wanted to know the whole story, and they got the biggest kick out of that. Even better, the priest invited the couple to take advantage of their conference complimentary evening cocktail parties for the weekend, which they did. But did it really matter? Every time we saw those priests, it was in the elevator or wherever they started making those crosses with their fingers, which to me kind of sounds like, kind of a half joke, half serious type situation. Now,
Yeah. They're not vampires.
right. One of the first mentions of automatic writing, ladies and gentlemen, was used in the Ouija board, has been found 1100 AD in a little known country called China.
Where's that? I've never heard of that one.
It's a historical document of Song Dynasty. The method was known as the planchette writing. The use of planchette writing, which means which means of
Necromancy.
necromancy and communion with the spirit world continued, and under the special rituals and supervision was a certain practice of the Guantian school, and it was forbidden by the Qing dynasty.
Now, the Chinese Fuji spirit writing involves some specialized vocabulary. A mythical phoenix like bird is used. The Fuji process involves specialized participants. The two people who hold the stylus are called planchet hands, and only one of whom is possessed by a spirit god, or immortal transcendent. Their assistants include a level sand who smooths out the sand table, a planchette reader who interprets the characters, and a planchette copyist who records them. Fuji automatic writing is still done in some areas of China today. Now we get into some of the media for the Ouija. some of this that's played into the dark side of the Ouija board and its evil. I know I've heard stories about people who have used this board growing up, and they would always say things like, "Oh, well, the ghost told me it was the devil." And then I remember hearing one person say that the board signed out "burn me," and they kept ignoring it and kept asking questions, and it would just reply back "burn me." Then finally, the board got fed up and caught on fire. I've heard of people throwing the board away only to find it back in their closet the very next day. Yeah. Now, I don't know if I really believe these stories. These are just stories I heard growing up. I've had my own experiences with the Ouija, but that's, neither here nor there. I've talked about that before on the show. But in the media, Ouija boards have figured prominently in horror tales and various media as devices enabling malevolent spirits to spook their users. Most often, they make brief appearances, relying heavily on the atmosphere of mystery the board already holds in the minds of the viewer, in order to add credence to the paranormal presence in the story being told. There was an episode of Lost in Space called Ghost in Space, and it took place in 1966. Also, the Waltons, the ghost story in 1974, have spirit boards as part of their plots. In 1986, there was the film Witchboard and its sequels, which centered on the Ouija board. I never saw the sequels, but in the original, it's called up the ghost of an axe murderer that ended up possessing the user. Boy, that was fun.
Yep.
And then the 1991 film, And You Thought Your Parents Were Weird, features the use of a board in an important early scene. Another one of my favorite movies, What Lies Beneath, has a seance scene with the board as well. One of them that I don't see here that was one of my favorites was in the show Charmed. They used the spirit board quite a few times to that was the way that the mother contacted them to get them to use or to release their spiritual gifts. And a few other times they relied on the board for help with the spirits. What else we got out there, bro?
Well, we also have, of course, the 2007, I'd call it a mockumentary called Paranormal Activity. Involves a violent entity haunting a couple that becomes more powerful when the Ouija board is used. Another 2000 film, Ouija, depicts a group of adolescents who use the board to cause a murderous spirit to follow them. While 4 years later, the Ouija experiment portrayed a group of friends whose use of the board opens and fails to close a portal between the worlds of the living and the dead. The 2014 Ouija features a group of friends who uses the board to prompt a series of deaths, which was followed by the 2016 prequel, Ouija, Origin of Evil, which also uses the device. Now, there was also, I believe, no, never mind. Now, some Ouija stories from the Museum of Talking Boards online do as follows. Crazed through Ouija, said the Boston Daily Globe in the evening of November 21st, 1891, and one of the earliest reported cases of a mishap using a Ouija board. The Globe reported that Miss Eugenie Carpenter, a fine looking woman and only 28 years of age, was found wandering almost naked in the streets. Her reason was gone. In an interval, she cried out, Ouija said so, and I know it was true. Further investigations revealed that she was married quite young and that her husband had deserted her. For the previous year, she had been receiving attentions of a young man employed as a brakeman on the Cons- on the Consolidation Railroad, but they had quarreled over a trifling thing and separated. Upon hearing of the marvelous power of the Ouija board, she bought one and asked her whether her husband would ever return. The board answered, no. She then asked if her lover would ever return, and the pointer spelled out, he has ceased to love you. He will never return. At this point, she became deathly pale, but after a time regained composure. It was a couple of mornings later that her neighbor went out to find her wandering up and down the streets, muttering to herself, Ouija said so, and I knew it was so.
Okay.
Forgive me for being so
Oh, I'm
blatantly
just wondering
sarcastic.
why your characters are from the South, even though they're in Massachusetts.
Ready they are. Because
No,
how would you like to hear some Bostonian going, don't you, the Ouija told me so. I had a
that's
heart attack. It
uh,
just sounds much more better,
okay. Now, the Ouija's first recorded suicide occurred in May of 1900 when Mrs. Sarah Elizabeth Griffin took her own life with poison strychnine. A former prominent Methodist church worker, she converted to spiritualism and became obsessed with the responses from her board. According to the Boston Daily Globe, as she lay dying, she gave her aged husband this ominous message: Papa, forgive me, but it was meant to be. Okay, now why is she calling her husband Papa?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't get that either. But she says, Papa, forgive me. It was meant to be. They came tonight and told me I should not delay. The night wanted me. I have done it and will soon be with them. Oh, how glad I am that I have been called. They kept calling and calling, saying, tonight, tonight, it's
Right.
going to be tonight. Sorry. They were relentless and said it was the decree that I should leave at once. So I have merely obeyed the summons. But you will not be alone long, dear, for I shall come for you soon. Yes, sooner than you realize. Now that's pretty ominous. Coming back for you, so just be prepared.
Yep.
Also, two Liberty residents, a Mr. John Chapman and his wife, became overexcited while participating in the neighborhood Ouija demonstrations, according to an 1892 Indiana newspaper. Panicked, they locked the children in their rooms and destroyed nearly all the furniture in the house. Concerned police found Mrs. Chapman, a minister's daughter, cutting circles on the wall of her room. Mr. Chapman was doing the same thing, but with a scythe. Carpets in the home had been slashed into small strips, and knives, hatchets, and other deadly weapons were found lying about. Mrs. Chapman explained that Horace Greeley had contacted her during a Ouija board session and commanded her to convert the word con- to convert the world to Masonic principles. It was unclear how their actions were going to accomplish this.
English
Um,
author Sax Rober, famous for his Fu Manchu novels and membership in such occult organizations as the Golden Dawn, credited the Ouija board with jump-starting his writing career. He asked if the board how he would best make a living, and the board spells out CHINAMAN. That was enough to inspire a long, profitable career, and it brought him fame, riches, and freedom to travel the world. The sleepy town of El Cerrito, California, made the news on March 7th, 1920, with the headline, "A whole town Ouija mad." Horrified police arrested seven people driven insane after using a Ouija board. One girl, only 15, found naked. Another naked woman explained because uh, she can communicate better with the spirits. I guess that's because they told her to. Who
She
knows?
took her clothes off because she could communicate better with the spirits nude.
Yeah,
I guess the clothes were constricting her.
yeah. In the following days, the madness spread to other towns, including one police officer who ripped off his clothes and ran hysterically into the local bank.
What is it with the Ouija telling people to take their clothes off?
I don't know. Officials quickly held a town meeting and decided to bring in a mental health professional to examine the entire population of 1,200 to prevent any future outbreaks of Ouija mania. They made the rational decision to ban the Ouija boards from the city limits.
Oh my gosh, that is crazy.
Yes. Now, let's go to Cottage City, Maryland. A boy began displaying unusual symptoms after his family experimented with a Ouija board. Odd manifestations occurred in his presence: the shaking of the bed, the sudden movement of a room furniture from their usual positions. The Washington Post first reported the incident on August 10th, 1949. Several articles followed, each one more sensational than the last. They told, they told the story of the boy's tribulations, the failure of medical scientists to treat his follow up, and maladies and cure by the Catholic priest. Excerpts from 51 Fate magazine. The whole matter might have been forgotten curiosity. It was not to be. In 1971, William Peter Blatty's heavily altered novel about the incident hit the bookstands. It quickly became a bestseller and a movie blockbuster starring Ellen Burstyn, Linda Blair. Its name, boys and girls, The Exorcist.
Now, I do want to point out that I have heard through the grapevine, I could be wrong on this, but I have heard through the grapevine that the grandson or the great grandson, one of the two, of this young boy who claimed to be possessed by the Ouija board, told them shortly before dying that the whole thing was a hoax and a way for him to get attention, that he faked the entire possession. Now, if that's true or not, I don't know. I just know that that's what I have heard through the grapevine. If anybody else has heard anything around that or knows anything about that, make sure you share in the comments. But we also have, going back to Sylvia, tongue, words, hard. Sylvia Plath and her husband Ted Hughes. And they were almost as famous for their turbulent personal lives as for their poetry. Despite Ted's failure to commit and Sylvia's chronic depression, they complemented each other in ways that only such an artist can. They regularly held seances with the Ouija board, and it provided poetic inspiration as well as more mundane results of weekly football matches. To the question, shall we be famous? The Ouija board answered for Sylvia. Fame will come. Fame especially for you. Fame cannot be avoided. And when it comes, you will have paid the price for it with your happiness. Your husband and your life, which is weird because she did die at her own hands. The Ouija board eerily was correct on all counts. After the couple separated, Sylvia did commit suicide. And after her death, she won the Pulitzer Prize for poetry. We also have concerned English villagers that held a Ouija seance to see if the board could provide any information about 3 local murders. Bludgeoned as they walked to school were a mother, her daughter, and their dog. A second daughter did survive the attack but with serious injuries. Investigators counted the number of blows to each victim as 16. The Ouija board suggested that the police re-examine an area where they found a bag of clothes from the victims. And indeed, a hammer was laying there in plain sight. Villagers were understandably upset at the police for missing such vital a clue. Embarrassed officials later issued a report stating they could not link the hammer to the killings and denied the Ouija board figured it in the discovery. Yeah, way to backtrack.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, it wasn't had anything to do with it. The Ouija board had nothing to do with it. Yeah, we're not
Don't look.
incompetent.
Don't look it over there. Now,
Yes, look over here, not over here.
exactly. Let me tell you about the latest Ouija supervillain to make the rounds of the boards. Zoso.
Isn't this the demon from the movie The Exorcist? Wasn't its name?
No, it was.
It went by Captain Howdy, but wasn't its real name Zozo?
I am not sure about that,
I
but
think.
according to a recent report, he's been known to rape his victims, completely drain people of all happiness and joy, leaving them depressed and suicidal. He feeds off all the negativity that your soul can reproduce, slowly getting stronger until he's strong to actually hurt you, rape you, and possess you. Variations of this warning are common. It doesn't occur to believers that if eventually that if were even remotely true, it would be on the cover of every newspaper and magazine on occasion. Fox News would be running coverage 24 hours a day. Fortunately, viewers in Ouija groups and other forums are tiring of this madness and will flame Zozo zealots unmercifully or have them banned completely. Zozo is often said to mimic voices of the dead, who the user of the Ouija board wishes to talk to. Cruel, sadistic demon who likes preying on people's insecurities and fears, often delighting in telling them they will die soon, and is awfully brutally women hating.
Yeah, misogynistic.
He loves to pretend he is other with spirits, and oftentimes pretending he's three different spirits at once. He plays on psychics, for instance. If a psychic is adamant that there is only one or two ghosts in the building, Zozo will confuse them by claiming there are nine ghosts instead. He'll also add some confusing scenarios by stalling him that he's just a little boy and that he's afraid of the malevolent spirits are haunting the place.
Okay, I've got a question on that. Wouldn't a psychic know different? Like, wouldn't they be able to feel the energy or know the energy to know that they're not really talking to who they think? Being a
Well,
psychic?
well practiced psychics are able to get that because he also Zozo loves watching his victims skirm with confusion. Oftentimes, he takes pleasure when ungullible believe human beings believe his lies. Zozo is very sadistic and loves watching his friends to fall out of his lies.
Now, I do have to say, if that is a spirit from The Exorcist, as I think it is, then it's all just a bunch of hooky. Um,
Hooey,
hooky, hooey,
hinky,
Jackie says that sounds like my ex husband.
yeah,
Were you married to Zozo, Jackie? So now comes the time that we ask you, what are your thoughts on the Ouija? Do you think it is evil, or do you think it's just a game? Or is it a tool that can be, when respected, a great way to communicate with spirit? Let us know
yes,
your
they are.
thoughts and comments in the let us know your thoughts in the comments. Yes, I think that I was. I love it. Yeah, so let us know in the comments what you think the Ouija actually is. If it's just a game that was created for pure entertainment, something evil, or a great tool to communicate. We'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes, and I also like to the fact again. Uh, we are well, at least I am. Uh, in chat to answer any of the questions or speak to you. I did place one of the stories that I had with the Ouija board in there.
Yes, he says he did tick off of it with spirit with the Ouija board, and it drove the planchette off the board.
Hmm.
I had an experience where they were misusing the board and treating it like it was a toy. And that night, a mirror fell off the wall and hit me in the leg.
Hmm.
Now, I don't know if it was actually the mirror was too heavy for the wall and that's why it fell on me, or something else more sinister. Um, and then there was one time that I was playing with some friends and we were thinking of what question to ask next. And I still had my hand on the planchette. As we were thinking of what to ask, I said something aloud and it actually did move with nobody else touching it.
Yes.
But if we go by
And
the
it,
theory,
and then, of course, there was also the time that a good friend of ours told us about that we she and some other friends asked about a recent murder and where would they be able to find the body.
no, that was a seance.
That was a seance. Okay, I thought
Yes,
that.
that was a seance because I was there.
All
That
right,
was me, my best friend, and our big sister.
we
Yes,
love our big sister.
yes, we do. But yes, did you ever hear? I swear I remember hearing this story. Tell me if you remember this story. Jim Scott playing with the Ouija board with his friends. Supposedly, they contact the ghost of Elvis Presley. They don't believe it says Elvis Presley, so they're mocking and saying that, yeah, right, whatever, you're not
Prove it.
Elvis. Prove it. And so they were listening to Johnny Mathis on the stereo. A big teddy bear fell over, hit the stereo, and it started playing Teddy Bear by Elvis. Do you remember that story? Or am I making that up? Is that all in my head?
That is a story which was told by our brother, and the next line is like, "Wow, can I have can I have your autograph?" And the board went dead.
See, I asked him about that recently, and he's like, I don't remember anything like that. I don't remember
Mhm.
that ever happening. But
Right.
I remember him telling me that story when I was a kid. And I'm glad that you remember it too, because it proves I'm not crazy. Yes. But I digress. We'd love to hear your comments in the chat and down below. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and hit the notification so you know when we have new videos coming out. Um, and if you're listening to a replay of this on any podcast platform, we do ask that you rate and review us if you can. And again, what kind of ratings do we like, Rick?
5 stars.
We do like 5 stars, but we'll take whatever you give us. Also, again, please leave a review. It is a way to get a shout out. If you have anything that you would like to share, any stories you want read aloud, any ideas for future podcasts, or anything like that, you can always email us at info@skepticpsychic.com. And again, we'd like to thank our wonderful research assistant, Shelly, for doing a great job as usual. We love you, Shelly, and we enjoy the information that you send us. Next week, we will be discussing the legend of the Green Children,
Not to be confused with the green-eyed lady, that
or Little
sexy
Green Men.
lady.
Also, not to be confused with the Little Green Men.
Right.
But we will be discussing this next Sunday at 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern, which is 7:30 Mountain and 6:30 Pacific. Is there anything I forgot to add, or anything you'd like to add on to that this week?
Yes. The Ouija board is not something to be playing with. I don't. I know some people say, "Well, it's just a hoax. It's just your hands moving and that sort of thing." But you're also delving into both the unconscious world as well as the what goes on beyond the thin veil of life and death.
Yes, and as Jackie points out, it is not a game, but a door that can be opened, and if not closed properly, it can be a portal.
Hmm.
So just be careful out there if you do choose to play with one. Again, we go back to our ghost hunting episode where it's good to protect yourself before using it
And protect yourself after using it.
and make sure you close it properly. Um, and if you don't know how to do that, I suggest researching it and looking into it before you touch one.
Hmm.
And other than that, we hope everybody has a wonderful week. We love hanging out with you all and look forward to next week. Sweet dreams, everybody.
And unpleasant nightmares.
Good night.